of Redeemer Church.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father God, I start this prayer by saying thank you. Thank you for this community and the resources that you have provided. Thank you for the ability to meet freely and to discuss openly. I thank you for all that are in attendance and the leaders that are appointed to serve the county this morning. I ask for your wisdom and grace this morning for every agenda item and for every voice that is represented to be heard and valued. I thank you for this beautiful county that we get to live in and be a part of. Thank you for your love and for hearing us this morning. Would you bless all that is in attendance and bless all of their families and their loved ones. I thank you for your goodness and your grace. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Kayla, for the wonderful prayer. Since we do not have our representatives from the Conservation District here yet, we are going to move on to item 3.2, which is a presentation from the Stanislaus County Law Library with their annual report. And that PowerPoint will be given by Jan Schmidt. Jan, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm terrific. A little cold, but doing all right. There we go. So my name is Jan Schmidt. Good morning, and I am the director of the Stanislaus County Law Library. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you and let you know about our mission and what we do and who we serve. There we go. So for more than 130 years, the Stanislaus County Law Library has operated locally to provide access to legal information. As an institution, we strongly believe that being able to provide and obtain legal information is an essential component of access to justice, and that without access, there is no justice. The law library is operated by a small but dedicated staff consisting of a director, one full-time reference assistant, and some interns from local paralegal and law schools. We are governed by an equally dedicated seven-member board of trustees. Our board of trustees consists of 4 local superior court judges and 3 attorneys, including Tom Bowes, who is an appointee of the chair of the board. Our board of trustees is, many people believe that the law library is just for attorneys. While we do have many materials that attorneys use to supplement their practice, particularly young and just starting attorneys, we really exist to provide the public with access to legal information that they could not otherwise obtain. On average, more than half of our patrons are actually just residents of the county who have a legal need. Our physical collection that's maintained to meet those needs consists of more than 14,000 volumes. We try our best to maintain a broad spectrum of legal materials, but sometimes that's difficult because we have such a diverse clientele and patronage. And providing materials for a user base that broad can sometimes be challenging. They have all kinds of different education levels and ability and language levels and languages to speak. But we also know that adequate research can't be done by just handing a student a book and telling them, here's your information, have at it. So we do our best to make sure that we have staff available to guide patrons in the use of that material. The law library has, over the years, gained an increasing web presence. Right now, we offer at-home access to accurate cases and codes through FastCase, self-help no-la-press books, which are kind of plain language How do I fix my traffic ticket? How do I file a divorce statement? How do I prepare an income statement? Some of it is for businesses, contracts, rental agreements, evictions, but that's available at home anywhere without having to come to the library. And if you need documents sent to you, that's a free service that we offer. We also participate in Ask a Librarian, where residents all over the state log into the state court website and ask questions, and we provide them a direction or a roadmap to the materials that they need. And so we do that kind of on a shoestring budget. Law library funding is often misunderstood. A lot of people believe that we receive part of the library tax, or that we have a regular allocation from the general fund, from the county or the state, and we don't. Law libraries are funded with a $29 filing fee for each initial case that's filed in civil court in Stanislaus County. That's not a lot, but it does account for more than 89% of our revenue. Stanislaus County does pay for our lease, and they provide all of the other services that are allowed by law under the Business and Professions Code. And we're very grateful for your generous support of what we do, both within the county and at the building itself. The problem with having funding tied to filing fees is that when there is a downturn in the economy, small rural counties like ours are hit really hard, because once the court has to issue fee waivers to those who can't afford to pay their filing fees, law library funding starts to drop. And in an economic downturn, lawsuits actually go down as opposed to going up. And you would think it would be the other way, but it's not true. So as most of you know, we had a struggle from 2008 to 2018 where law library funding was cut by more than half. And particularly Valley counties, Merced, Madera, Modesto, Stanislaus, felt it the hardest. There were a number of law libraries statewide that were getting ready to close their doors, and the state stepped in 2018 after a decade-long lobbying effort and provided some emergency funding. And we've received that funding 3 times since. This, though, is the last year that we will receive an allocation in the budget unless we're able to obtain another round of emergency funding. And it really makes for a great deal of volatility in what we can plan and what contracts we sign and how we can continue to serve the public. As you can see, the state revenue, which is represented in the orange, really, when we get it, oftentimes makes up more than the court filing fees that we're expected to operate on. So you may find, or you may ask, why law library funding is even important to you. It's important because the justice gap exists. It's real. And law libraries are the safety net for the 71% of moderate and low-income families who face serious, legal, life-altering issues every year, but cannot find professional help and cannot afford an attorney. Legal aid and self-help are wonderful agencies, and they do terrific work, but they are limited to by what your income is, or what your subject level is, or what the scope of your issue turns out to be. Law libraries help everyone. We help them without regard to legal issue, scope of problem, or socioeconomic status. We don't ask where you live or what your job is. And while we aren't attorneys, and we don't provide legal advice, we offer the tools, guidance, and resources that you need to solve your own legal issue if you seek the help. We do that for more than 500,000 patrons per year statewide, and about 12,000 Stanislaus County residents per year. So we hope that if your constituents have an issue and you need help or they need help, that you send them to see us. We hope that you will stop by and visit. We're happy to provide you with a tour. And we thank the county again for the support that you give us for our mission and our patrons and our work. So stop by, and I am always here to answer questions or give a tour.
Jan, thank you so much. Do any board members have any comments or questions?
Sorry, Jan, thank you very much. I apologize because I'm going to do my annual story here about the law library. But when I've said this 100 times, or I've said it at least 12 times, I guess, since I've been here. When I first started my practice 30 years ago, at least 30 years ago, went out on my own, rented a spot, started to try to offer services as a CPA firm. I couldn't afford a tax library, and all of us have to have, the tax law and a tax library to do it. And I just didn't have the money to, and it was expensive at the time. It was just the books. It wasn't on the internet. There wasn't any other way to do it. And so I would go to the law library often to do my research, and so I couldn't have done it without you guys. You helped me get started, and I know that's just my story. I'm sure there's a ton of other stories out there, and as you say, it's not just for lawyers. So we very much appreciate all that you guys do there.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Buck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jan, for the people in the audience and the millions watching on the internet, do you need to make an appointment to show up to the law library, or you just show up?
You just show up right now, and there have been times when we required appointments. We have reduced the number of available seats that we have to Westlaw, so if you want to get in and you want to be guaranteed a certain database, an appointment is recommended, but it's never required.
Thank you.
Questions or comments? All right, thank you so much.
All right,
Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to public comment. Do we have any written comments before we open up to the public? No written comments? Okay. This is the time for those in the audience, those in attendance, to address the dais. You have a 5-minute limit, just to be equitable to everyone. So anyone who would like to comment on anything not related to the consent calendar, please come up. Okay. Seeing none, we will close public comment. Okay, and just to confirm, we did not receive our representatives from the Conservation District to give their presentation. I don't see them in attendance. Okay. So we will move on to item number 5, the consent calendar. And I know we are pulling item B1. So we will be pulling item B1. Does any members of the audience wish to pull any items from consent? Okay, seeing none, we will bring it back to the board. I will entertain a motion for consent calendar.
Other than B1.
Other than B1.
Motion to approve all items other than B1.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Graywall and a second by Supervisor Buck Condit. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, passes 5-0. All right, item B1. Mr. Withrow.
Yeah, I want to just speak on this, if I could, just for a second, and I'm not sure if there's anything we can do or not. First, I very much appreciate all the effort that's gone into this from staff and then from those involved in the selection committee as far as figuring out how we're going to spend this, excuse me, $750 million, $50 million, I wish, $750,000. But as I went through here, there were two items that kind of stood out, and I just kind of questioned. And again, I know this is hard going through this process and trying to figure these things out, and we're not all going to agree on all of them. One of them was just school districts. I had a hard time with us approving money for school districts when a chunk of our property taxes to begin with go to school districts, and as far as the taxpayers' money is going towards the school districts, us helping fund those, I have a hard time. And then as I learned, I think when we set up the criteria for this, we said school districts could be included in this, so I don't have much of a leg to stand on that, I guess, at this point, but I should have said something earlier. And so that's fine with that one. And the other one, and I don't know if anybody else has any other issues with any of these ones, and I know we can't really pull these things apart and probably and take them one at a time, so I don't expect that. But the one that really stood out for me was the Valley Improvement Project, and it has to do with Stanislaus Climate Justice Action Now. And we're given $15,000, and I just don't see the nexus between our cannabis dollars and community money that we collect from our cannabis permitted businesses towards going towards youth, and I don't see the connection between that, like I said, the kind of nexus between what we intend that money to kind of be used for and an organization that's promoting Stanislaus climate justice action now for youth. So that gives me a little heartache to see that one. I just don't see how that was the intention of our dollars to be spent that way. A lot of these other programs, great programs for youth to try to help the youth with various things. It's almost ironic that we're collecting money from cannabis and using it to try to keep kids from getting involved in cannabis, basically, getting involved in drugs and use of cannabis. But there's a lot of good programs here that we're using it for. But that one, I'm just having a hard time with the connection of that. So for what it's worth, I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't know if anybody else has any concerns about anything or questions, but that was my one.
Manny?
Thank you, Chair. So my question, I know that when we originally started this disbursement of the $750,000, we had talked, I think Damien and Will, we had a conversation, and there was a committee put in place. If you could just freshen my memory, if you can just please come and answer, how was the selection of that committee? Because I know that at that time we were going to have a couple people from the cannabis industry, a couple people from the community, and then staff. So if I could just get a refresher on that, because I mean, hindsight 2020, like Supervisor Withrow said, we're not going to agree on all of them, but I just want to make sure that the process is at a point where we can have more discussion, maybe even have a board member or two on committees like this, so that when these decisions are made, we have opportunities to bring them up at the time that the conversation is being had.
Sure. Thank you for your questions. Damien Martinez, Stanislaus County Chief Executive Office and your current cannabis program manager. So good morning to Chairman Condit, board members, CEO Hayes, and County Council Bowes. So the specific to your question, Supervisor Graywall, for the individuals who served on the committee, we had representatives from the CEO's office, so myself and Will Shirley, a confidential assistant with the CEO's office. We had representatives from the Stanislaus Community Foundation, Amanda Hughes from the Community Foundation, who's also in attendance here, who can speak a little bit more, if you would like, on the actual process that we went through. We had a board member from the Community Foundation, from their grants committee, and the Next Gen Fellow Program. We also had from the Stanislaus Cradle to Career, their director, Megan Lowry. And for the cannabis industry, when we had met individually with board members, that I know that was something that was important to have representatives from the cannabis industry to serve on this committee. The criteria that we used were for cannabis operators who were in, at the time, full compliance, also caught up on their fees and their payments. And we had reached out to several cannabis operators. Unfortunately, for reasons unbeknownst to us, we were unable to have multiple representatives from the cannabis industry, and we had one representative from All Season Organics who was on that committee. So that is the evaluation committee.
Yeah, and I know that that the members that you spoke about earlier were brought up, but I would have felt more comfortable having people from the industry in there. And it's unfortunate that the criteria was some that weren't in compliance, because I know we've had issues with some of them being in compliance. But that would have been a good opportunity to let us know that we weren't getting, the people that from the cannabis industry for that reason. So going forward, if we can just work on the people that are directly impacted or contributed to the monies that were collected, that'd be a good thing for me to see.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any more questions or comments before we open up to the public? Okay, we will open up to the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mataka, good morning.
Well, as the only member of Valley Improvement Projects here today, I will speak to the concern about why we were awarded money. as far as climate change goes. Where I live in Grayson, we have, every year we have several illegal marijuana grows, okay? As point in fact, one year I had this terrific pesticide smell when I walked out my backyard, and I called the Ag Commission, and they sent somebody out, and it was real, like super strong for about 10 minutes, and then it dissipated, right? So they checked all around the neighboring fields and stuff, and I was told that, well, most likely it was an illegal marijuana grow where they used pesticides that are probably outlawed and that they shouldn't be using. And they did some investigation, and not too long after that, there were some raids, for lack of another way of saying it. And so I think that the connection between climate change and that is, in our community, we were the pilot program for the pesticide rule that's going to come out for the whole state in Grayson. And, these illegal grows often use these toxic pesticides on their grows, opposed to the ones that are doing it by the law and that are organic and don't have that on them. So there is a connection. I just want to throw that out there. It's not just, there is a connection between climate justice and the money that's getting awarded through the cannabis program to keep those illegal grows and the effects of pesticides on our community. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else from the public wish to comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Vito?
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to pass B1 in its current form.
Okay. Looking for a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Chiesa and a second by Supervisor Condit. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, passes unanimously, 5-0. All right, moving on to discussion item 7.2. We have a presentation by Sheriff Jeff Dirksey regarding the approval and accept the final update of the local emergency due to the winter storms and flooding impacting Stanislaus County. Oh,
It's fine to do that.
I apologize. That's my.
He was excited.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sheriff.
That's fine. Let's go
No,
with the sheriff.
let's do the
Come on up.
7.2. That's
You're going
just
to be shorter than we are.
my inexperience. I moved on past 7.1, so I apologize. We will do 7.1 next. So, Sheriff, good morning.
No apologies.
Gonna get you done
necessary,
quicker
Mr.
than
Chairman.
normal.
This will definitely move me along
All right.
my day. So
well,
thank
you're
you.
welcome.
As you know, so good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for having me back. As you know, we've been under the state of emergency now for I think it's 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, due to our winter storms and the flooding that ensued. And last week, I spoke with you last week, provided you an update on this, and our goal by the end of last week was to lift the final evacuation order for that little sliver there in South County along the San Joaquin River by the end of last week, and we were able to accomplish that. Our partners at DER kind of did their analysis, evaluations, inspections, et cetera, of the public wells and septic systems out there, and determined that there was no public health threat as a result of the flooding to that. And we kind of finalized some things on Friday, and Friday afternoon of last week we lifted that final order, allowing everyone at least access back into their homes. Some people may or may not have chosen to stay away for whatever reasons, or they had work, whatever the case may be, but it is no longer under our direction that they do that. It's now they're of their own free will and how they want to go about things. So with that, it is my recommendation that we end the state of emergency, which requires a board action. That will be up to you. And with that, just know that there will be no impact on our recovery process. As we spoke last week, there was also, on Wednesday, Cal OES and FEMA came out. There was a bit of a tour to assess the damage in our county. We do believe that we have met the threshold for state or federal compensation or reimbursement for our expenses. That is not yet confirmed, but we're pretty optimistic. We should have that answer either later this week or sometime next week. But there will be the ending of the local emergency has no impact on that recovery process. And so that is really all that I have for you, pending your questions.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Any questions? Okay. Any questions from the public? All right. Well, thank you, Sheriff. We appreciate it.
You guys have to vote.
Yes. Looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the sheriff's recommendation.
Second.
All right. We have a motion by Supervisor Withrow, second by Supervisor Graywall. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, passes unanimously,
Thanks, Jeff.
5-0. Thank you, Sheriff. All right, now going back to item 7.1, discussion item. We have a presentation by CEO Hayes regarding our 2030 investment blueprint.
Thank you very much. I was wondering if maybe a minute you were just going to move us to consent, which would have been great. But we actually really want to talk about this. This is a good moment for us and the entire team that's been working on this project, some of who are with us today. I will be joined shortly by Karen Warner from KP Warner Consulting, and I think we've invited Dave White from Opportunity Stanislaus to be here to share a few words as well. But I am going to kick us off, and it truly is my pleasure. We're talking about Stanislaus 2030 this morning, and particularly we're talking about our bioproducts manufacturing initiative within Stanislaus 2030. But before we get to some of that detail, I do like to just do a real quick precursor of what Stanislaus 2030 is for those of you who are hearing this for the first time. So we basically have 5 different initiatives under this economic development effort, and lots of work over the last year, and I want to talk about what's been accomplished over the last year, but I just want to highlight the 5 different things that we have focused on and that we have agreed as a community will be really important for us to improve our economic future in Stanislaus County. And those 5 things are talent development, entrepreneurship and small business dynamism, removing non-skill barriers to jobs and training, our governance and capacity building for economic development in Stanislaus County. And then the last, the one we're going to focus on here today, is an effort to create and to support a new traded sector in Stanislaus County on bioindustrial manufacturing. So a couple of stats that are really important just with respect to, I always like to remind ourselves, why are we doing this work? Why is it so important? And I think Karen's presentation will start with some of that as well as it relates to those traded sector jobs. But I do like to remind everybody of our research that was done throughout the Stanislaus 2030 process with our partners at Brookings Institute, and they did confirm for us what many of us recognize, and that is that we have many residents in Stanislaus County in struggling families that are struggling to make ends meet. It's over half of our population in our community. Just to lend a little more tangible consideration to what we're talking about, we have about 145,000 children in Stanislaus County. 90,000 of them are growing up in struggling households economically, and 85% of those children, so 85% of them have at least one adult working in the home. So those are the challenges that we saw emerge through the data process. When it comes to job opportunities in our community, we recognize that we need to do more work to try to create good and promising jobs in our community. About 65% of the jobs currently available in Stanislaus County do not meet the Brookings definition for good or promising jobs. I always remind everybody, it's not as if any community has 100% in those 2 categories. However, we definitely want to do a better job and need to be reaching towards those goals of at least having half of our job opportunities to be in those good and promising job categories. In order for us to help those children that I just mentioned, 90,000 children growing up in struggling households, Stanislaus 2030 sets a goal of what would it take to lift half of them out of those struggling circumstances and into an environment of economic self-sufficiency. And Brookings research tells us that we would need to develop 40,000 jobs that are in the good jobs category in order to lift half of those children out of those circumstances. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to set goals, we're trying to set strategies as a community, not just government working on these things, but very much involved with the private sector, with our philanthropic community, our civic leaders throughout the community, education, nonprofits, everyone we can bring to the table that has a role or has a lever to pull that will help us develop this future that we all strive for. So in a nutshell, that's what we're trying to accomplish as we set out. Here was our first year. We've basically completed our first year, and here's what was accomplished. We consider it kind of our planning year over this last year, although it felt like much more than that. We were essentially planning for the future. We did our coalition building and program design. Took a long time for us to even figure out how would you accomplish this task. We did research and data analysis, some of which I just shared with you. Lots of community engagement and reporting. We've been all over the community reporting this information as much as possible. And then those work groups developed those work groups were put together to develop the specific strategies that would lead to what we call the investment blueprint. We did attach a copy of the investment blueprint to this agenda item. So it's on our website. You can get it with the agenda item that's being considered today. And we have copies, or I don't know that we have brought copies today, but this is what our investment blueprint looks like. It essentially is our path forward, a game plan, where we were at in the middle or late 2022 about where would you make investments to improve our economy locally. So that's what was accomplished in year one. We are now starting year two, and I want to talk about what's going to happen next. Essentially, we're looking to do two things in this new year. We're looking to develop implementation teams. So once you have a blueprint, you have to have a strategy to advance the blueprint and to continue to the work. We have two different teams that will be standing up in the current year. One is our Stanislaus 2030 team, and they will be responsible for the whole of all of those different work group areas that I mentioned at the very beginning. And then we did recognize that the item on bioproducts, that particular issue alone, has so much opportunity as well as complexity that it would require its own separate implementation team and development effort. So we have a separate implementation team just on bioproducts. Today's agenda item is requesting board support to kick off that effort and to fund it through its first year of operations. We're going to talk a lot more about that. That's why you have the little red arrow there just pointing that that's what we're doing here today. So what will those implementation teams do? Well, over this next year, and in the agenda item, we basically say over the next 10 to 12 months, you can expect them to create activation and investment plans. So that would include stakeholder engagement, any stakeholder that would be associated with the particular areas that we're focused on. We're hoping to bring into the fold if they're not already in the fold, creating specific implementation strategies along with outcomes. How do we plan to implement what's in the investment blueprint? And then if we're successful, what do we expect the outcome of that investment to be? Certainly considering funding options. We're going to talk about fiscal impact and potential contributions from the county later this morning. However, we do expect that the majority of funding for what's in the investment blueprint to come from other sources, whether they're state or federal sources, as well as private. There's lots of opportunity there to bring in funding in Stanislaus County that otherwise would not have been available to us. And then ultimately, as part of those activation and investment plans, we have to have ownership. It's one thing for a group of people to get in a room and to say, we're going to do something, here's what we're going to do. But unless you have individuals, organizations stepping forward to say, we will lead this, we will assume the leadership chair, and in some cases you might have co-leads, but unless you have clear leadership, you're most likely not going to be successful over time. So that's very, very important that we identify where our ownership in this community will be around all the topics that fall under the umbrella of Stanislaus 2030. So that's the next 10 to 12 months. You're going to see many, many board agenda items that reference this work as the activation and investment plans are developed. If they are developed in a way where we believe that county funding would be appropriate to support some of these efforts, you'll see an agenda item come back where we discuss those investment plans and activities. That'll be throughout 2023. What happens after that? Well, essentially, years 3 and 4, implementation. It's us, now that we have an investment plan, we have strategies and so forth, we'll be working on those 5 areas to implement them and to really see the wheels turning, and you'll see this entire effort in motion. Last thing I want to say before I leave this chart is that I do want to recognize that some of the items, some of what you're going to hear about today, I asked Karen to actually be prepared to speak to some of the work that's already taking place. Although we talk about implementations in year 3 and 4 on this chart generically, we're already implementing some of this. It's actually live in the moment. So some of these efforts are going to be on a fast track, and others are going to be on a more deliberate path, where you may not have as many partners ready to go, or the phones are ringing. I would normally say the phone's ringing off the hook, but nobody calls on each other anymore. So the emails are coming in and saying, let's get to work on this right now. We have all these opportunities in front of us, and we literally have to strike while the iron's hot. So that's kind of the overview, the big 30,000-foot level of where we've been, where we're at today, and where we want to be in the next couple of years. So with that, I wanted to introduce, and I'm going to say a couple of words about our main speaker here this morning, Karen Warner with KP Warner Consulting, and she's going to walk you through this proposal for investment in bioindustrial manufacturing, and particularly for helping stand up a new organization that we refer to as Beam Circular. So you're going to hear a lot about that this morning. But first, I just want to reference and acknowledge Karen and her background. Karen is quite our local success story. By the way, she's going to hate that I spoke about her this morning, but we're going to do it. Karen's quite a local success story, born and raised in Oakdale here. Literally grew up in an environment where her family is running a veterinarian clinic out of the home, and so very much has ag roots local here in Stanislaus County. Has a great background in cross-sector partnerships and developments, both public-private collaborations and so forth. She's worked with nonprofits, philanthropic organizations, private sector, local, state, federal government, pretty much every single level of government that you can guess, along with all items and partners that you would expect to be in any kind of a social impact enterprise. Has been involved with many startups in the past, and just has more education than I would ever imagine I would attempt to do for myself. And when I say she's a local success story, she certainly is, because she went to Stanford, got her undergrad, then went and got her MBA, and just for fun, she got a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, just for fun. So Karen is a very driven individual that delivers, is what I wanted you to know about her. She started working with us on Stanislaus 2030 on a couple of different efforts, but once we saw this traded sector opportunity emerge around bioindustrial manufacturing, we recognized that she had some particular talent and skill to lead that effort. So we tried to position her to come alongside us and help, and she's been very, very gracious with her time over the last 6 or 7 months, especially. Working to try to put together what could be possible for our local community. But she also knows that she can't do this alone. She worked very closely with the Brookings Institute to form many of the ideas that you see in the investment blueprint. Brookings has been one of the most rewarding consulting experiences I've had in my career, and working with that level of talent and expertise to come in and do the research, data analysis, and to think with a very broad lens, what is possible for Stanislaus County. However, even in those exercises, you have to have local boots on the ground, as they call it, and Karen has been our boots on the ground in Stanislaus County to advance all of those efforts. And as we transition into this implementation mode and this startup mode, we very much need a local leader to help lead us through that charge. So with all of that said, I'm going to invite Karen on up. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a partner with us throughout this effort, and it's all yours.
Oh my gosh, Jody, I did hate that, so but thank you. Wow, I am so excited to talk about the updates on this initiative, and incredibly honored. And I told Jody that I woke up feeling really joyful this morning, because what an extraordinary thing that this board has initiated and allowed to have happen here in our community. This is a very special opportunity, I think, at this moment to actualize the intent behind the Stanislaus 2030 initiative, and to really think about economic development in a new way that is community-driven, that is really rooted in these tangible outcomes that Jody talked about, in terms of generating family-sustaining jobs, lifting children out of poverty and out of struggling status in our community. Do I just say?
Patrick will
Okay.
know. Oh, there you go.
Perfect. All right. So there are some very text heavy slides that I'm going to be talking through because this work is deserving of detail, but I don't want us to get lost too much in the weeds. At the high level, this all comes back to how we're going to generate those good and promising jobs in our community. And this is centered on the recommendation that came out of the Stanislaus 2030 market assessment that we need to nurture traded sector activity in our economy. And what that means is that we need more economic industry activity that brings in resources and wealth from outside this region so that it can circulate in our economy. And we know that in generating traded sector activity in industries that bring in wealth, that bring in resources from the outside, we're not only nurturing and creating on average higher wage jobs, because as you see on the right in this particular slide, the average wages of traded sector industry jobs are higher than those in locally serving and other types of industries. But not only that, every traded sector job that you create, every traded sector dollar that comes in the community helps to generate and create more locally serving jobs as well. So this is about an industry that's going to help us grow traded sector activity, but it's also about this bigger picture of ripple effects throughout our economy. So what we did as part of Stanislaus 2030 as a reminder of the background here is we conducted this analysis of where there might be sector or industry opportunities that are particular to our region, where we have a competitive niche and an opportunity to grow in a way that complements our existing assets. So we worked with Brookings to do this really comprehensive analysis of our existing factors and looked at kind of really big landscape analyses of macroeconomic trends and where there were growing industries and what might align in particular with what we have here in Stanislaus. And we identified this emerging specialization opportunity in bioproducts, or what we came to refine and call bioindustrial manufacturing, which I'll talk more about so we're all kind of regrounded in what that is. But what's exciting about this particular industry is that it offers us the opportunity to diversify and really grow new industry and new businesses here in our economy, but it builds upon our existing legacy industries like agriculture, food processing, and logistics as well. And we're excited because as we analyze this industry, it offers us access to some of those really great, high-quality, family-sustaining jobs, but that are accessible to our local workforce and are in alignment with our workforce pipeline and talent. So we'll talk a little bit more about what this industry is as a reminder. So bioproduction is when you you use bioscience to convert organic material, so often waste and byproducts from food and agricultural sectors, and turn them into other useful products. This is a really big tent. There are a lot of things that you can make using bioproduction processes or bioindustrial manufacturing. Bioindustrial manufacturing, that term specifically applies to all of the non-pharmaceutical things that you can do with bioproducts. Things like construction materials, so cement, for example, agricultural inputs like soil amendments or fertilizers, a wide variety of industrial chemicals. A really neat example is indigo dye, which is one of the most commonly used chemicals in the fashion industry globally. Bio-based plastics and other polymers that can be used across the global supply chain for a wide variety of products. And then a variety of food applications, for example, alternative proteins, which is a really quickly growing industry segment. So really, it's amazing. One thing that I've been learning a ton about over the last year is how much breadth there is to this industry. And it's really fascinating that you can make all of these different products with very similar facilities, equipment, and workforce capabilities. And these facilities don't look that different from a brewery, because a lot of these products are made with different types of fermentation technologies. So this, to kind of think about the big trends in this industry, bioproduction is expected to reach in The non-health, non-pharma world, so that space that we're interested in, bioindustrial, is expected to reach $2 trillion globally on an annual basis by 2040. That bio-based materials market alone, so things like plastics, is growing 26.5% by 2026. This is rapidly growing right now. This also is an industry that is very much of interest to the public sector. So this is considered to be a national priority to grow our domestic capacity and leadership in the bioeconomy, both because this is important for national security. It has to do with supply chain resilience and energy independence as we make more products with bio-based inputs rather than fossil fuels. It has also been prioritized from an environmental perspective because overall growing and nurturing what's called the circular bioeconomy or the bioeconomy helps us move from extractive and polluting economic models to more renewable models. So there's a lot of state and federal resources that are being mobilized to support and kind of catalyze the market development around this industry, which means it's a great time for communities like ours to put our hands in the air and demonstrate that we're ready to lead in this space. What's exciting is that we are not only interested in leading in this space, we are the best region in the country to do so. I think when we started this analysis and started to explore this industry, we had no idea the degree to which we were going to validate and discover how well positioned we are for this industry. So Stanislaus anchors the tri-county region called the North San Joaquin Valley. And Stanislaus and our neighbors, San Joaquin and Merced, we are the only counties in the entire country that have the combination of these three criteria. We have large-scale agricultural production, we have a high concentration of manufacturing activities, top-tier concentration of manufacturing in our counties, and we are driving distance to a center of innovation and startup activity, including leadership in biotechnology. Only place in the country that has this combination of factors. And this is important for this industry because it means we have an abundant supply of feedstock, which is the input for this industry, actual waste and the organic material coming from ag and food production, things like orchard waste or grape pumice and pulp that comes from food processing, et cetera. But we also have the appropriate workforce adjacencies, expertise that goes along with having a high concentration of manufacturing. And again, we're right by where there's all of this startup activity and innovation happening in the Bay Area. And a lot of those startups right now have to leave the country in order to manufacture, or they just are dying. They're not going to scale, even though they have next-door neighbors here in the valley that, that are ready and positioned to be the best place to do production in this industry. So in taking this kind of, what we know is that while we are well positioned to lead in this industry, it's not going to just happen by itself. There are regions all across the country and the globe who are competing right now to be the place where this type of manufacturing and production is going to really scale and grow. And we need to be proactive about investing really strategically in specific strategies and initiatives and projects that will make this the best place in the country for bioindustrial manufacturing firms to come to scale. So what we did is we worked with Brookings as well as a working group grounded in local industry leadership as well as national industry leaders alongside community partners to develop a specific set of strategies that will create an ecosystem or an environment around this industry. All of these strategies are grounded in best practices for what's called cluster development. So industry cluster development is something that a lot of communities have done around the country and around the globe to try to create a concentration around a particular sector or economic area, because we know that there are a lot of benefits that come from concentrating businesses and activities in a particular industry in a place. And there are things that a community can do in thinking about public and private resources to support the development of an industry cluster. So the overall sector agenda, which is laid out in the Stanislaus 2030 investment blueprint, includes a variety of projects and innovations spanning these 5 pillar areas. We have cross-cutting initiatives that really provide the backbone and create an overall ecosystem and coordination for this effort. That includes launching a bioindustrial manufacturing growth partnership, which is what we are doing with Beam Circular, and I'll talk more about in a moment. But it also includes the launch of a really exciting and ambitious testbed manufacturing facility that will fill a really critical market gap for California and the nation in supporting the scale-up of firms in this space, and is an example of shared infrastructure that can be really catalytic in attracting and growing industry players in our region in this sector. We also have multiple different projects that relate to ensuring that there is access to innovation. And in particular, we're not looking here to be the next Silicon Valley. We're not interested in being ivory tower research R&D leaders here that are doing basic science. We are interested in innovation that is market-driven and use-inspired, that actually translates into real deployment in the market, and that is allowing and enabling business growth, because that's how we generate these good jobs. We have projects that relate to capital connections, so this has to do not with generating new money, but actually connecting existing sources of capital, both private investment as well as public sector grants and funding at the federal and state level, connecting these existing sources of capital with firms in this region, as well as taking stock of those networks of portfolios of firms and connecting those into our region so that we become the go-to place for companies to establish their manufacturing operations through that network and that sense of connection. We have a number of strategies related to infrastructure and ensuring that we have the right enabling infrastructure, things like having a very clear inventory of industrial sites that are appropriate for this type of work, and evaluating really targeted and strategic investments in shared infrastructure. We also are going to be exploring the really broad space of feedstock access. So this is looking at the broader supply chain around bioindustrial manufacturing and thinking about how do we make sure that the farmer who has an abundant supply of orchard waste actually is connected in a way that makes economic sense, is connected into the supply chain, and your bioindustrial manufacturing company can access that orchard waste in a way that is smooth and makes sense. This is a challenge that is still being addressed nationally and globally in looking at bioindustrial manufacturing, and we have an opportunity to really lead the way around feedstock access. And then finally, really importantly, we have to be connecting all of this to our local talent, to our workforce, so that we're drawing and connecting the dots between this industry and actual accessible job opportunities, especially for communities who have been traditionally left out of our current economy. So we want to be very specific and intentional about ensuring that workforce providers and our education system is aligned with industry needs, that we are actually training people for the real-life jobs that are available in this industry, and that we are ensuring those jobs are accessible to our local talent. So that is a big portfolio of work. It totals, in terms of this investment blueprint, it totals $57.6 million in investments to catalyze this sector. That is not a total that is expected to be funded locally. This is about being able to mobilize and leverage really strategic local dollars to access funds from outside Stanislaus, both private sector investment as well as state and federal investment. But this is ambitious, and frankly, that figure is about catalyzing this sector. It's about the next 3 years of seed investments that we can make to really grow this. And I will flag that over half of that, or approximately half of that total, has to do with this really ambitious testbed manufacturing facility play. We know that not all of this can happen without really intentional coordination and drilling down into operational plans for each of these project areas. And that brings us to the first step in all of this, which is launching a backbone center of gravity, a hub for this sector, and what's referred to in the investment blueprint as a bioindustrial manufacturing growth partnership. So this growth partnership is going to serve as a hub for regional collaboration, for external engagement, as well as internal alignment across the variety of partners who need to be engaged in realizing the opportunity of this broad agenda. Establishing a well-resourced and coordinated central hub has been shown to be a really key element of success for other communities that have attempted to implement these cluster development strategies. And the hub is responsible for representing and promoting the region to the broader industry globally, as well as other stakeholders and investors, organizing and supporting our local partner efforts toward a joint work plan. It's not about this hub implementing everything, it's about enabling and unlocking the power of a variety of partners to execute on this strategy. We will be pursuing resources to propel kind of the broad portfolio of projects. We'll be tracking progress and monitoring outcomes, especially related to ensuring that all of this is oriented toward our ultimate goals of ensuring access to job opportunities for our local population. And we'll be refining the strategies as we go, because we know that this is going to be an effort that will involve a lot of learning, and we want to be nimble and responsive and be targeting our strategies in ways that respond to industry needs and the realities on the ground. This is really our opportunity, I'm going to steal language from Jody here, to plant a flag in the ground for Stanislaus County, to anchor this new regional industry hub here and have this be a way to align local efforts as well as attract external investment and collaboration. So that brings us to introducing Beam Circular, the new organization that we've formed, that we are in the process of launching, that is going to provide that growth partnership function for our local community. Beam Circular is framed around propelling the circular bioeconomy. We are focused on transforming waste into value across food and agricultural systems. The impact goal here is really all about generating family-sustaining jobs here in this region. But I like to say we are very intentionally and strategically place-based, but we are globally minded, because we know we have to be. If we really want to compete on a global level in this industry, we have to be ambitious in thinking about our role in the global marketplace. And that requires us to be really collaborative across the broader North San Joaquin Valley. Beam Circular, this organization is going to provide some backbone coordination to really drive that portfolio of initiatives and projects that we talked about that are part of this strategy. I've listed some of the very specific kind of tactical projects that are in that portfolio here. And then on a functional level, this is going to provide full-time staff capacity to offer services that advance the ecosystem as a whole, to really serve in that coordination and project management function to drive this forward. We'll be providing advising and technical assistance to the local agencies responsible for implementing this work, offering funding research, policy engagement, grant writing, a lot of that tactical kind of the behind-the-scenes labor that goes into really realizing a big initiative and opportunity like this. And then importantly, this is about, again, that flag in the ground, regional marketing to the industry and broader investment community. What's exciting is that we already have made a lot of progress in establishing this backbone. And I know this is a lot of text, but we wanted to provide you with some of the detail here about what Beam Circular is going to be accomplishing in year one. So this is really about establishing that backbone organization, hiring the dedicated staff that will be advancing this overall agenda, and providing that necessary infrastructure for the overall strategy. We have a number of core programming kind of delivery goals and that our operating budget is going to support over this first year. It includes launching and coordinating the innovation engine that I'm going to talk about in a moment, advancing the project planning for that test bed facility. We're going to be developing a community benefits in the circular economy working group that is really about working closely with local communities to establish and innovate around the ways that this industry can build community wealth, can be of environmental benefit to local communities, and the ways that we can generate really specific metrics and impact goals for this work over time. We'll be working, we've already identified a very exciting opportunity to become a region that has a bioeconomy development opportunity zone rating, which is a mouthful to say, a way that we can actually be assessed and then marketed to bioeconomy firms as a good region to do business in this space because of the strength of our feedstock supply chain. This is a really technical space, and in order for us to really sell ourselves to the firms that are trying to make smart decisions about where to base their operations, we have to provide the data and the validation of the strength of our regional economy and our regional supply chain for this work. And then a number of other projects here are related to, again, the first steps necessary to moving on infrastructure investments, that workforce and talent pipeline effort, broader feedstock access, innovation, and recommendations, and then across the board kind of policy, technical assistance, and grant writing to move all of this forward. On a practical level, I want to note that we have a really exciting advisory committee in formation. Two members that I want to highlight are former Secretary Ann Veneman, who served as the U.S. and the State Secretary of Food and Agriculture, who was part of the working group in STAN 2030 that developed this strategy and is staying on as a strategy advisor for BEAM. We are also very grateful to be working closely with Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and their bioproducts unit. They have been key industry advisors in the development of this overall strategy. And Dr. Deepti Tanjori, who is the director of that bioproducts unit, is going to be serving as the chief technical advisor for BEAM Circular. And then critically, we are so fortunate to be working very closely with Opportunity Stanislaus, who will be serving as the fiscal sponsor during this incubation period of BEAM Circular. We don't want to waste a bunch of time, working on incorporation or setting up a brand new startup C3, spending a bunch of resources on kind of the backboning of an organization. We want to start doing the work. We also want to make sure that we're integrated with and leaning on an established organization with a long track record of large-scale projects, because that will enable us to really move on things like large-scale federal grants. I want to invite Dave White, CEO of Opportunity Stanislaus, up to offer a bit of comment on his organization and role as fiscal sponsor of this effort.
Well, thank you, Karen, and thank you, members of the board and Mr. Hayes. It's a great honor to be here. I've been involved with Stanislaus 2030 since inception, served on the executive committee, and what is being discussed here is very much in alignment with our 5-year plan. We're very excited about BEAM Circular, and something, when you struck gold when it's already happening. We already have companies that are coming here that are trying to take advantage of bio-waste. Now, they may not be totally in alignment with our vision, but it's already happening. Companies like Aemetis and recently Divert is establishing a presence in Turlock. And so that tells me that we're on the right path, and we know that this industry has a lot of potential here. What this industry will do for Stanislaus County is provide more diversification, which is always good. When you have diversification of your economy, then you have more opportunity for the workers, and that's really what we're excited about. One thing I've learned about innovation is that innovation springs up from what you're really good at in any community, in any region. We're really good at ag here. We're really good at manufacturing, and so it's not. It makes a lot of sense that this industry would spring out of that industry that's already here, and it's happening. I can't say enough good things about Karen. You've seen how passionate she is, how smart she is. She's really the right person to lead this initiative. And we're very proud to be able to incubate and offer space and services to BEAM Circular as they grow into a viable organization and really deliver on what their vision is. And we're going to be right there along the way. There's so much synergy between our two organizations. There's so much synergy about business attraction and talent development and all the other things that we're working on. So I'm just very excited about this. I think it's a really great step forward for our county. And I think we're going to remember this day. We're going to remember this day where we talked about this infant stage that we're in, and then we're going to see all the success that comes out of it. So thank you so much, Karen and the board, for supporting this, and we're ready to go to work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. And I just want to really thank Dave and the entire team at Opportunity Stanislaus for already the level of close collaboration that we've had in setting up the structure for this. I think this is a really great example of the intent behind Stan 2030 and the design of this sector strategy, which is that it's about aligning resources and ensuring we're not duplicating efforts, that we're really integrating and implementing through partnership. So I couldn't be more excited about this close collaboration and relationship with Opportunity Stanislaus. So I wanted to share just a few of the early wins and examples of progress that we've already had to date before this is officially launched. This is work that's been taking place over the last few months as we've gone through this transition from development of a strategy into creation of operating plans and preparing for kind of a really full-scale launch of this effort. So something that happened in the fall that I think is going to be really essential to the success of this work over time is that we formed the North San Joaquin Valley Bioindustrial Manufacturing Innovation Engine, which is a mouthful, but we can call it the Innovation Engine. This was an opportunity prompted by a funding opportunity through the National Science Foundation that really offered us a mobilizing tool to think about creating a coalition of partners around the development of this sector, and in particular looking at ways that we can be a leader in innovation in this space across our region in a really use-inspired way that connects to workforce and connects to actual job creation. So we developed a leadership council of 25 local and state institutions. That leadership council continues to grow and will be meeting for the first time February 24th at UC Merced. There's a joint management team of this innovation engine that consists of UC Merced, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and Beam Circular, anchored by Opportunity Stanislaus. We had a really successful strategic planning retreat in Modesto in January and are really looking forward to making this work real. The goal is over the next 2 years to go through a really robust planning phase that will include pilot projects. At the end of that 2-year period, we will be positioned to submit what we hope will be a successful proposal for the NSF Regional Innovation Engine program that would make us eligible for up to $160 million of investment over 10 years. So right now we're in phase 1, which is planning, but I really want to emphasize that even as we go through the 2-year planning process for this innovation engine, which is tremendously ambitious and regional in nature, we are starting to do the work that is attracting businesses, that is creating jobs in this space, and laying the long-term foundation for the infrastructure of this sector over time. Just as a little anecdote, we've already seen some new research proposals catalyzed by this new coalition. So just the other day, UC Merced and Berkeley Lab submitted a research proposal for feedstock diversification that would never have happened without this coalition coming together. So we're excited, again, to already see work happening even while we're very much building the plane while we're flying it. I'm also excited that MJC was accepted several weeks back as a member of BioMade, which is a National Institute for Bioindustrial Manufacturing. This puts MJC into the same grouping and network of other institutions across the country that are generating a workforce pipeline for this industry. It will make MJC eligible for funding to support the growth of programs in this space, and is just an early example of what we hope will be very strong collaboration with BioMade over time. We have been, as Dave mentioned, already pursuing some early business development wins and opportunities. We've submitted some industry-specific RFI responses, requests for information, some proposals to firms looking for places to base their projects. And this is just us getting our training wheels under us of how we can be selling our region specifically to firms in this industry. We are already starting to conduct tours with potential partners, including a bioproducts incubator, and we've been able to offer support to firms that are already here in our region, like Divert, which takes waste, food waste, and is expanding a digester project in Turlock. Because of the work that we are organizing here, we were able to offer some tailored support to that local company to support their success. On the state and federal advocacy level, lots of work underway. We're excited to be hosting CDFA Secretary Karen Ross next week here to conduct some site visits and explore what we're doing here around bioindustrial manufacturing. We have conversations underway with a variety of state agencies or supporting advocacy efforts and grant exploration at the federal level, including submitting public comment just last week on the White House's executive order related to biomanufacturing. Again, just samplings of what we expect to be very, very active advocacy over time to support this sector effort in our region. And national investors are already starting to take notice in what we're doing and what's bubbling up here in Stanislaus. We were invited a few days ago to attend a bioproducts convening coming up hosted by Schmidt Futures and the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, who are looking to fuel leadership in this sector, and they took notice of what we're doing here and they want to learn a lot more. And then I've also been invited to participate in a philanthropically supported fellowship program to support the launch of Beam Circular. So folks are starting to take notice of the leadership underway here in Stanislaus and in the North San Joaquin Valley. I just want to share here these are the partners that have signed on officially as part of the Leadership Council of our Innovation Engine. Delighted to have all three of the four-year universities as well as all three community colleges from our Tri-County region represented, our three counties, of course, and then in the private sector, a wide variety of associations and firms. We're continuing to grow that network as well, from across the agricultural industry, food processing, as well as bioindustrial manufacturing. We are really hoping to use this Leadership Council and the working groups it will form as a way to engage community, the nonprofit sector, government, and very critically to center industry and business needs so that we can align this ecosystem around the growth of this sector. And then I do want to share this quote from California Secretary of Food and Agriculture, Karen Ross, who submitted a letter in support of our innovation engine. And I know it's a little bit, but I think it's worth reviewing what Secretary Ross provided in support of our initiative. And unlike some letters of collaboration or letters of support, I did not draft this for her. This came from the Secretary's office, which I think is particularly exciting. So, as the leading agricultural state in the nation and the producer of a significant supply of fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, and dairy products, in addition to many other crops essential for health and nutrition, this proposal holds the promise of accelerating innovation in new product development and manufacturing with its accompanying higher paying jobs of the future to lift families out of poverty. Of particular importance is the role this work will play in the realization of a connected economy that converts waste streams and food and ag processing byproducts, climate-smart products, and replacements or fossil fuel-based products. The forward-leaning solutions embodied in this engine will ensure the long-term viability of agriculture and the vitality of our rural communities. We're very excited about the interest that this initiative is generating at the state and the federal level, because that's going to be really essential and important to the success of what we're doing here. I'm going to end on just a few next steps. I won't read through all of this, but I want to highlight that this work is underway. We are ready and eager to move quickly. We need to establish a backbone team to be acting on all of these opportunities that are time sensitive, that are coming our way. So we want to launch Beam Circular. We want to fully launch that innovation engine with that coalition, that growing coalition of partners that I highlighted. We want to be responsive to timely opportunities for funding from state and federal sources as well as private investors. And then we're going to be advancing very specific elements of that broader project portfolio, as well as doing kind of the next level of planning so that we can make really specific recommendations and provide detailed information to Stanislaus County and to other investors in this portfolio over time. We're continuing to build out that strategic partner and investor network, and I know I'm really eager and excited to collaborate with folks across our community and would welcome the engagement of a variety of partners and community members in this work to make sure that this is really centered on and geared toward achieving the community-shaped goals in this investment agenda. I know this was a detailed and long presentation, but we know this is a really meaningful investment that the board is evaluating, and this work is worthy of our kind of detailed attention. This is a timely opportunity and one that I'm so grateful and excited to be a part of.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm going to get through a few more slides, and we're going to open it up for questions, because I'm sure you have several questions about what you just heard. And I do just want to recognize that was a lot of detail. That was a lot of information and robust information in a board report. But as I shared with Karen last night in preparation for today's presentation, we're asking the board to support up to $10 million in investment in this effort. And there'll be a lot more detail that follows about specific investments. And we did feel it was very, very important that we go through all of the moving pieces that are in play here and why this is so complex and will require this level of resource in order to capture and maximize our opportunities in Stanislaus County. So I just want to remind you, we're going to talk about fiscal impact and what we're requesting to the board today, but we'll start by just recognizing what our funding buckets and priorities were for the American Rescue Plan Act. We have several different categories that we're focused on for our ARPA funds, and I do just want to mention, I think we've mentioned in the board report as well, we're here today to talk about allocating a portion of the $30 million that was set aside for economic development and job creation. We are going to consider the remainder of those funds to support other efforts under Stanislaus 2030, as well as some other economic development supports in Stanislaus County as well. So we'll be back to you in short order to talk about the remainder of that $30 million and where we envision would be the best investments for our community. But I also want to recognize that we had identified up to $17 million in reserves for ARPA funds. We will need some of that money, bless you. We will need some of those funds to just support some of the administrative processes that are already underway or approved by the board. So that reserve number is most likely closer to about $16 million. We'll be back before you in the next 1 to 2 months with specific recommendations on those reserve funds. I just want to make sure our board, as well as members of the public, are tracking. We haven't forgotten about that, and that work is currently underway. Specific to our fiscal impact, we are recommending that the board designate up to $10 million in ARPA funding for the future bioindustrial manufacturing activities and strategies, as was just laid out in our presentation today. In order for us to start that process, we are requesting your authority to contract with Opportunity Stanislaus as the fiscal agent for Beam Circular to support this first year of operations, which would total about $650,000. Beam Circular will work to develop the specific investment strategies and recommendations for the remainder of the fund. So we're requesting your support for up to $10 million, and of that $10 million, the $650,000 is part of that $10 million. So we have this remaining balance of about $9.35 million, and this team will be working actively over this next year to bring forward what are the specific investment requests, how can we actualize all of those wonderful ideas and opportunities that you just heard presented to you today. And I also want to recognize that although, you know, we're very, very proud of the content of the investment blueprint and all of the ideas that went into working with this, this team is learning new things every single day. So you can expect that our recommendations may pivot from some of the things that are in here because we see new opportunities emerging and so forth. So everybody, please keep your minds open as to what might be possible under this effort here. And then I want to talk about next steps in general for Stanislaus 2030. So I went through this slide earlier around what we did in the first year and then this phase year 2 startup. I want to recognize that the next thing that you'll likely see from our team with board recommendations is to come back and to make recommendations on the startup of the implementation team for the broader Stanislaus 2030 initiative. Amanda Hughes from Community Foundation is here today. We're not having Amanda speak on this topic because we have all this other work around talent development, entrepreneurship, and small business, removal of non-skill barriers to jobs and training, and all of these other efforts underway. I want you to know that there's an equal and robust effort to handle these other issues as well and recommendations, and we'll be back before you to talk about what we can do with respect to standing that team up and how we can position them to make sure that we can bring individual investment requests forward for the future. And just a couple of last things. First is, we didn't scratch the surface on everything that went into developing the investment blueprint. It was just a very high level. If you're interested, and this is the first time you're hearing this information and you haven't seen our other presentations, you can please feel free to go to Stanislaus2030.com, see all of our data. It's very easy to look through and so forth. We even have a social media presence, so you can follow us wherever you do that stuff. I'm not that good at that, so I won't quote how to do that, but it's out there. And then the last thing is I'm just going to share with you, we have 4 staff recommendations for you today before we're happy to take any questions. First is to accept this update on Stanislaus 2030's investment blueprint specific to bioindustrial manufacturing. The second recommendation is to approve a spending plan of up to $10 million in our ARPA funds for the 2030 investment blueprint specific to bioindustrial manufacturing. The third is to authorize the Chief Executive Officer, myself, to negotiate and execute an agreement with Stanislaus Business Alliance, does business as Opportunity Stanislaus, including any of our amendments not to exceed $650,000 for a term of 1 year, and that would support the formation and operations of Beam Circular as provided in our presentation today. I do want to recognize that we did include an initial work plan project proposal for Beam Circular. It's attached to our agenda item, so if you want to see the specific budgets that go behind that $650,000 request and so forth, it is included within the agenda item and so forth. And then the last is to direct the auditor controller to increase our appropriations and estimated revenues by $650,000 and to take the necessary budget actions to ensure that we can fund this effort as requested. That concludes our presentation this morning, and we would be happy to answer your questions.
All right, Mr. Hayes, thank you. Karen, David, thank you so much for your presentation today. Wonderful job. Do any board members have any comments or questions?
If
Terry?
I could, yeah, thanks, Chance. Just real quick, just a quick clarification here that I'm just confused with, and then I'll just have more comments later after we finish everything else. But Karen, thank you very much. David, thank you. And thank everybody for all the work they've done on this. So I'm having trouble with the Beam Circular versus Opportunity Stanislaus, and I can see, I'm looking really at the scope of work. The draft of scope of work is what I went through before, and just was trying to wrap my head around what was going on there. So it talks about during the incubation period, Beam will be legally accountable to the governing board of its fiscal sponsor. So the $650,000 is going to Beam Circular, which is a 501c3 that was formed, or it's going to Opportunity Stanislaus, and then it sounds like if Opportunity Stanislaus is considered the fiscal sponsor, though I think Opportunity Stanislaus, when I look at the budget, it looks like Opportunity Stanislaus is putting in some in-kind services of about $40,000. It's really our $650 is a lion's share of what's happening. It's coming from the board. So is Opportunity Stanislaus's board going to govern this, or how's this going to work?
Great question. So a common model for launching new 501c3 organizations or nonprofits is operating through a fiscal sponsor. Some continue to do that in perpetuity. Some do it for a short period of time. We have framed out an agreement with Opportunity Stanislaus to serve as the fiscal sponsor of Beam for starting with 1 year, and we will be evaluating over the course of this year long-term strategic structure. So at this point in time, Beam Circular does not operate as an independent 501c3. Its legal status is as a project of Opportunity Stanislaus. However, through our fiscal sponsorship agreement, which is based on this model used by other organizations as well, we will operate a separate bank account that's specific to Beam Circular. In practice, we will be, we will have independent staff and leadership. However, legally, the governing entity is Opportunity Stanislaus, and we will be accountable to the governing board of Opportunity Stanislaus for the duration of this fiscal sponsorship.
Okay.
Does that help? Or
Kind of. So I see an advisory committee for Beam Circular, but the ultimate decision-making process is going to come from the board of Opportunity Stanislaus, it sounds like, on the spending of the $650,000.
So from a governing perspective, yes, and I will be providing monthly reports to the board of Opportunity Stanislaus. The programmatic advisors for Beam will be those, that advisory committee. The legal governing board will be the Opportunity Stanislaus board.
Okay.
And Dave, please feel free to come up if you want to.
And just our representation on Opportunity Stanislaus, is there anybody from the, I don't think we have anybody from the board on it, do we?
We do. You do. Manny's on the board, and
perfect.
There's also members of the team or the working group for the Biomanufacturing Initiative. We have several who are on our board. Michelle Reimers Dylan Olvera, of course Manny is a member of the board, and Andy Foster from Emeritus. So my suggestion, yes, the board will have ultimate authority, but our intention is to carve out a working group as part of our board in addition with others that would provide some governance. And we can always look to add additional people to our board to satisfy your any concerns you might have, just to make sure that we have our intent is this. Our intent is to provide a safe haven and organizational structure to allow Beam Circular to grow. And our intent, we have space, we have accounting, we have everything in place to do that. And and there's so much synergy with us and Beam Circular that it makes a lot of sense to be co-located and work very closely together on different initiatives. We're going to have a separate account within our account where that money will flow. It'll be held there, and it'll be monitored and governed by our board. And we have very strict financial principles. We've had clean audits for the last 10 years, no exceptions. So everything will be run very tightly and according to the intent of the agreement. Okay. Well, what this does for Beam Circular is they don't have to worry about setting up their own account. They can take advantage of our healthcare system, everything that we have. They can take advantage of that. Similar to the same relationship, in a way, that we have with the SBDC, if you know about the way we're structured.
Okay, and we'll follow this budget that was being presented here as far as the $650,000 is going to be based on this budget right here that we're looking at. Is that right?
It's pretty much a pass-through to Karen and her team as she grows her team for Beam Circular. There is an indirect, but that's minimal compared to the overall amount of the budget. And then we're offering all the services for free. They'll be part of our audit, all of our insurance, our space, and everything else, utilities.
I do want to highlight, just because not everyone can see the attachment, I know immediately, that the overall first-year operating budget is, do you have it in front of you, Jody?
It's 985.
Yeah, so the request for seed investment from the county, that 650 is about a 62% of that total operating budget, and we have been in the process of identifying other additional partners to share in the cost. For example, the in-kind from Opportunity Stanislaus, but also industry sponsorships that are underway, philanthropic support, and potential engagement of other public sector support as well.
Okay. Just one thing I'd like to add, and it really is just kind of the practical nature of how this work should be done over the next year, what we expect, and I think what everyone I've been involved in talking to agrees, is that we need to stand this work up so we can consider other investments. Over $9 million is what we're requesting in other investments. I can assure you that county staff, even myself, are directly involved in what these strategies are, where the time is spent, where we're going to be going after, potential investments, and if for some reason we're not operating in a cooperative environment, those investments won't be made. I think everybody understands that. I wouldn't expect just because we're incubating this under Opportunity Stanislaus that any conflicts would materialize with what we're trying to accomplish. I'm not expecting that whatsoever. But if conflicts did begin to materialize, I think we would address them very quickly and work with them through it, because the real effort before us are those bigger investments. That's what we're after.
Okay, that's good. That's all I got for now.
Okay. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Karen, Dave, thank you for your presentation. Being from Oakdale, you know that District 1 is heavily into ag food processing. And you touched on it a little bit, being the center of gravity, the hub. What does that look like for District 1?
Oh, I love that question. I am, Jody knows I have very deep pride in my Oakdale roots, so I'm excited to talk about District 1. And across our entire county, our agricultural communities. As a center of gravity for this particular industry, a very tangible example of what that means for our agricultural and our food processing players is that we have to set up very specific networks and outreach to our existing agricultural firms and food processing operations. One, to invite in strategic input as we are developing this industry play, but on a really practical level and a business development level to connect dots as suppliers of this feedstock. So one element of this strategy that I mentioned is the importance of what we're calling feedstock access. That's building out the overall supply chain that supports this industry and helping local firms access and apply for incentive support, for example, that exists at the state and federal level to adopt new practices, to purchase new tools that allow us to access some of that food and agricultural waste and byproducts. There are business implications there. And so as this market is under development, one thing that I think is an exciting opportunity for our legacy industries is accessing some of those resources and benefiting from the supportive policies in place at the California level, for example, that encourage adoption of waste reduction practices, the adoption of new tools and processes that allow people to move waste from the orchard or from the food processing kind of waste landfill, divert that into the supply chain for this. So a lot of that is really just the direct relationship development, inviting firms into this work to be supportive of collaborative projects, but it's also about ensuring that there's access to the technical assistance, to incentive programs, to funding opportunities, to enable local businesses to adopt these changes in practices and to upgrade their own innovation. Is that helpful?
Yep.
Yeah, and just one other thing specific to District 1, because Karen probably doesn't understand where all the district boundaries are drawn and so forth. You mentioned Oakdale, but you also represent Riverbank, where we have one of our very specific primary locations for future business development at the former Riverbank ammunition plant. So.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that as well.
Okay. Manny?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Karen and Dave, for the presentation. A lot to digest, but it's good information, and I appreciate it. And always for the public consumption, $10 million is a lot of money, and it's the taxpayers' dollars. So we've had many, many briefings in the background to come to this point. And some of the questions I have, one, again, I'm not asking to look at a crystal ball, but this investment, I see 10 to 12 months, we start seeing some of the recommendations on where we want some of this money spent after the initial investment. When do you feel that private sector, when do you think this will grow to a point where we can go to the private sector and private sector feels that it's lucrative or a good business decision for them to invest? So it's just not government dollars funding this program, but we're getting private investment coming to the region.
Absolutely. So now is the short version of an answer to that, and of course there's a more nuanced response. So we already have private sector engagement and sponsorship of even our seed activities. So in that operating budget that you've received, that the county is helping to catalyze with this, would be catalyzing with this investment. Part of that budget incorporates, for example, $80,000 in sponsorship from the private sector to support one of the projects that we know we want to implement in the first quarter of this year, which is that bioeconomy development zone assessment rating. We were actually approached by the Almond Board of California who had already been doing diligence to assess that opportunity and is motivated to pursue this type of feedstock supply chain assessment and rating because the almond industry wants to see the development of the bioproducts market, because this is an opportunity to turn byproducts and waste into value in that for that industry. So that's an example of actually private sector coming to our cross-sector collaboration and saying, hey, we would love to partner to make this assessment possible, and we are willing to co-sponsor this. And they actually have offered to sponsor the majority of the costs and are inviting us in from the public and the nonprofit perspective to be partners because they want to ensure that it's in alignment with true economic development priorities. So that's an example of industry actually already proactively coming to us wanting to invest in this space. In terms of some of the broader portfolio, I want to be aggressive and ambitious in pursuing private sector investment. My general philosophy is that the role of the public sector is to fill market failures and to provide catalytic capital or investment that can be leveraged into larger scale investment. So I want to make sure that I'm helping to support our local public dollars in being deployed as effectively and strategically as possible where we aren't able to mobilize private investment, or where a really strategic investment on our part will unlock so much more funding and opportunities, both at the state and federal public level, but also from the private sector. So the hope is to be making recommendations to the board in terms of future investments that are really strategic and that complement or help to unlock that private sector investment that we're already seeing energy underway.
And that's kind of where I was getting at is, so right now we're getting the smaller investments, which again, for the public should be very promising that there's the private sector already willing to invest in this endeavor. But when the true line is when we get substantial investment as far as infrastructure, people moving into the region, people now providing those jobs that we feel a shortfall that, through the Stanislaus 2030 research and Brookings, we feel that we're short on those good paying jobs. In that type of investment, I guess what I'm hearing is the expenditures we make 10, 12, 6 months, hopefully it's even earlier, unlock that potential of greater investment from the private sector.
I think that's exactly right. I think the way I would think about this is like a snowball. So we're already seeing investment coming in. As Dave has mentioned, we already have firms and companies operating here in our community in bioindustrial manufacturing that are looking to grow. For example, Divert in Turlock that is in process of growing their facility. Metis that is a key partner in this work and is growing significantly in our region. And a variety of others. Those industry players are already underway and already acting, and what we want to see is as we're making these strategic public investments in this space that we are growing and that those investments and that actual business activity is going to scale and grow over time. So I wouldn't think of it so much as nothing will happen and then one day all of the private investment and business activity is unlocked. It's that it's seeded now, and we want to see some hockey stick style growth over time catalyzed by these public sector dollars. And I also would highlight that the overall investment agenda that right now through the investment blueprint is framed as this portfolio of $57.6 million. That's to support the initial launch that's framed around a 3-year time frame. And so within those 3 years, we're going to be needing to source a variety of investment dollars beyond what's seeded by the county to fulfill just that 3-year activity. And my hope is during that time period, we will be seeing returns on that immediate investment. And tee us up for the long-term growth that obviously you don't overnight create an entire industry, but I think we can start to see early wins even while laying the foundation of that long-term growth.
And I appreciate you covering that. For the public's consumption, I mean, $10 million, we want to make sure that we're able to provide deliverables. I know staff's working on that, and it's encouraging to see that you guys are on top of that. But seeing deliverables, seeing those good paying jobs in those regions will really show that this was a good investment for the community. Thank you.
I do want to say one other thing on timeline that we're very sensitive to, which is the time constraints around expenditure of these ARPA dollars of the American Rescue Plan Act. We know that this is an unprecedented, really, amount of investment available to our community, and we have to spend it in the next essentially we have to dedicate in the next 2 years. And so we're very sensitive to that timeline and the urgency to having those dollars deployed in a way that will result in an impact, as you know.
Thank you. Go ahead, Terry.
I'm sorry, Chance.
No, go ahead.
And I just want to make sure, so the 650 is kind of the first phase, you say 3 years, Karen, of the 2.3 that we call out, 2.3 million that's called out here out of the 57 million. The 650 is the first years of what expected to be 2.3 million. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
and that overall budget. And my hope is that, again, we're identifying over the course of this year additional, we already have, kind of cost share on board, but as we're looking at the future ask of the county for Beam Circular, that will evolve, and that will evolve over time based on our ability to, again, engage other investors in this work.
Okay. And also just want to recognize, like all things in the investment blueprint, that was our best work at the time. We're going to learn more. It may turn out that 2.3 was not enough or more than was needed for that effort. I just want to make sure everybody's tracking.
Okay. I just have a couple questions followed by some short comments. And this is in line with kind of the questioning that I mentioned during our board retreat, is how do we ensure geographic inclusion?
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. I think that, essential to this work is making sure that this is not, theoretical conversation about sector and industry development, but this is attached to real people's lives and access to real jobs. To me, geographic inclusion and access is part of why it's so essential to have a coordinating hub, to have Beam Circular in the mix here to play that role of convener and aligner, and to be responsible for tracking and monitoring metrics related to inclusion and access. So part of the role of Beam, including through the community benefits working group that was mentioned, is to, one, engage community in a really inclusive way to ensure that we don't have blind spots when it comes to access to the workforce pipeline and to opportunities generated by this space. Part of it is having that central hub to serve as that convener with the core responsibility of ensuring geographic equity and inclusion across our region. And then the other thing I'll note is that as we're looking at, in a really practical way, at projects, I know it's the intent to have a really open RFP process, for example, when we're doing anything as significant as evaluating potential sites for a testbed facility. That would be, I don't want to get too far ahead of my skis on specifics here, but the big picture framing is that we want to ensure that all of our municipalities and unincorporated parts of the county are part of and open to the opportunity to participate in site identification processes, for example, and where projects actually get put. This is very much we know that we need to work across the county and in a tri-county regional way, really collaboratively. We know that the ways that people live and work don't follow, municipal boundaries or even county boundaries. So we want to be real to the way that industry works, and we need to be intentional that our programming, that our job generation, that our business support is inclusive to the entire geography.
Right. Yeah. No, I know that's primarily important to my district in particular. My district is a minority-majority district. We're also a district that consists of primarily socioeconomic disadvantaged communities. If you did that per capita, I would believe that would come out that District 5 has the most representation, unfortunately, of the socioeconomic disadvantage. And so it's good that they will be having a seat at the table. And I know that this, on a macro level, is intended to lift all boats, essentially. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And we have to be intentional about looking at the boats as they're being lifted to ensure we aren't leaving folks behind. So I think you bringing this up is important, and an important element of the work is the intentionality and the monitoring and evaluation of who are accessing these jobs, where are projects based, and continuing to support the broader portfolio of work in Stanislaus 2030 that addresses all of these complementary issues around barriers to jobs, things like transportation and childcare, things like entrepreneurship, particularly among minority-owned business leaders. So there's all of this complementary work in Stanislaus 2030 that we know will be very much intersecting with this sector development strategy.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I come from the view that South Modesto is just as important as Central Modesto, and Keys, Grayson, Crow's Landing, Empire, as long as they all have a seat at the table and have just as equal resources when it comes to this project. That's going to be very beneficial for them. I do want to ask, how do we measure our success moving forward?
Yeah, core question to all of this. At its simplest level, we want to be measuring our progress toward filling that 40,000 good jobs gap that was identified in Stanislaus 2030. At its heart, are we nurturing and growing good family-sustaining jobs in our region. That means tracking where we are at overall in our community in terms of provision or in terms of the number of jobs that we have available that meet those good jobs requirements, and we need to be assessing who has access to those jobs to ensure, again, we don't have issues around particular communities being left out of those opportunities. And then specific to on kind of the outputs level of this work, we're going to be measuring and tracking how many businesses and operations do we have in bioindustrial manufacturing present in Stanislaus and in our region. We'll be tracking the number of investment dollars from outside this community that we've unlocked and that we've brought into Stanislaus and into the North San Joaquin Valley. So we want to be unlocking more resources that would not have been brought into our community otherwise, both private and public investment. We want to be tracking the number of businesses and firms in this space, and ultimately, again, we want to be looking at job generation and not just job counts, but job quality and access to those jobs.
Okay. Let's go, Joe.
I just want to add one thing. We absolutely are focused on quality jobs in Stanislaus County. So thank you, Karen, for just always mentioning that as our number one. This effort has brought to our attention that there are so many different tangible benefits to the community beyond just quality job creation. Karen laid out many, many of those. And I just want to add one more, that a lot of this effort may improve our environment here in Stanislaus County as well. There are a lot of manufacturing and agricultural systems and products that we can actually come alongside and support from an environmental perspective as well. Not only helps the bottom line for all involved there, but also improves the impact of local industry in our community.
That's right.
Just want to add that.
If anyone wants to get into the weeds on the environmental impact of this industry, would love to chat about that as well. And there's some great evaluation of the ways that bioproduction can benefit the local surrounding communities around agricultural production and food processing as we move waste again into sustainable products.
And then one, that's to my point, is that we need to ensure that these quality jobs are also in Keys, Empire, Crow's Landing, Wesley, Grayson, South Modesto, and that's obviously a concern of mine. But this is going to do wonders for our agricultural community. There's no doubt. You've already highlighted that. But I do think we need to keep in mind, and if it's tangible moving forward, that everyone in the ag sector is lifted up. Not only the farmer, but the farm worker. And that's something that we need to have in our purview, is that in the spirit of inclusiveness and the spirit of raising all of our boats, we need to also consider the farm worker in this component. So if you can keep that in mind, it'd be greatly appreciated.
100%. Thank you for mentioning that, Supervisor.
Okay. And so if there's no further questions, we'll go ahead and open to the public. I know I have a couple comment cards here. I believe Mr. Donoso is first. So Mr. Donoso, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. And I want to say this a joke, but it looked like a joke. Mr. Chairman, first, the so-called quality jobs, I don't see that happen. If we have the Mexican, American, and Latino community 2 years behind in math, reading, and writing, who's going to do that job in this new proposal? If we are not fulfill the education process to have skilled workers, who's going to do that job? This is not Santa Clara County. You're wrong to think you're going to be Santa Clara County someday. I don't think so. We are almost 35 years behind Santa Clara County in every level. So to pretend that you're going to do a wonderful job is a big mistake. It's nice to talk. It's nice to pretend, not to dream, because it's like a dream, but not in reality. Mr. Chairman, number one, this paper is in Spanish? No, I don't think so. So under the Executive Order 13-1666, if you're going to receive federal money, you're supposed to have these documents in any language. And you are failed to do that, Mr. Hayes. In regard to the opportunity, Stanislaus, it's a nice joke. He's doing for 2020, doing a research in economic. It was paying a lot of money to do a report in the last 5 years of the COVID-19, how was the COVID-19 affect this economy. It never had that report. Mr. White, it disappeared. It contracted another agency from Texas to do the job, from Dallas. It's the same he's doing right now, to be the fiscal agent. If Mr. Terry Woodrow had questioned and not was understanding the complicity of the two groups being in one group, can you imagine our average person? No, and he's an accountant. And he's a member of board of supervisor with a lot of knowledge, and he's still confused. So Mr. White have a conflict of interest because he's in another board that's supposed to be under the executive board of the economic committee of this beautiful plan. Mr. Greenwell is a member of that, another conflict of interest. You have 3 members, Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Rocha, and Mrs. Patrick, be in the special board. Another conflict of interest because these guys are the person that supervise and be there. So when you come into a group and make decisions, you have a lot of conflict of interest. Mr. White is set in one of the agriculture committee of this project. So it's another conflict of interest. And under all the contract for the opportunity, Stanislaus opportunity, it never mentioned the 13,985 executive orders, never mentioned in the contract. And that's supposed to be under the ARPA funds. And the department, Treasury Department, we're going to send a letter to questioning not only the conflict of interest that the county council is supposed to be looking at the same time as the violation of civil rights, because Mr. Candy is right. How you going to, this program or this project going to affect or help the underserved committee? I don't think so. What underserved committee is part of this executive committee? No. The underserved committee was part of the 100 people that Mr. Hayes invited? No. So who you will serve it? Who participate in the decision making? The Stanislaus opportunity failed to report the COVID-19 5 years effect. So how you going to present this plan again? This Stanislaus opportunity supposed to do a special project for a cross-landing airport. You never finish the report, still talking about. And you're going to have another big project failing over 20 years, the cross-landing project from the airport. Man, what a joke. You really, you are not really thinking. He's a good salesman. Mr. Hayes is an excellent salesman, but not good leader. We're still questioning that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And would you like to address the bilingual component, that we have capability, access to make sure that our bilingual community has equal access to the information?
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that very much. So the Stanislaus 2030 investment blueprint is available in Spanish on the website at Stanislaus 2030. I actually really genuinely appreciate the opportunity and the reminder to make sure that as we're going about this work, that we're being really inclusive in our communication and in our opportunities to engage with community. So it's an important reminder.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. All right, next we have John X. Mataka. Mr. Mataka.
Thank you. Good morning. John X. Mataka with the Grayson Neighborhood Council and also with Valley Improvement Projects. First of all, Board Chairman Condit, I'd like to thank you, Chairman Condit, for mentioning the farm workers. You know, through this whole presentation and through everything, we hear about how important the ag community is, and it is very important. It's the backbone of this whole area, from San Joaquin to Merced and Stanislaus. But you never hear about the farm worker. You never hear about the great asset the farm worker is to this whole valley and to the whole nation, as a matter of fact. And I'm going to give you an example. I know recently the board is one of the 3 recipients for about $800,000 grant to assist farm workers, and it's going to go through the Community Service Agency through Central Valley Opportunity Organization. But I haven't seen any ARPA funds go to the farm working community at all. San Joaquin County allocated several $1 million to farm workers in particular. Merced did the same thing, but I have not seen any ARPA funds specifically targeted specifically for farm workers, whether they're documented or not. So I want to say that in the scope of this whole plan. Now, what I want to say is this, that the idea is to establish a shared pre-commercial scale up production, a quote, test bed facility, enabling firms to validate processes and procedures that move from a lab-based pilot viability to a commercial manufacturing, filling in market and distinguishing the region nationwide. That's from page 41 of your report. And that the goal is to target 20 firms, to make a pipeline of bioindustrial firms piloting early-stage products at facilities like Berkeley National Lab Advanced Biofuels and Bioproducts Development Unit. You want to convert waste streams to bioenergy, turning wood plant material into liquid biofuel. You want to make, in the process, you're looking at making industrial chemicals and plastics from this project. I have a concern about those 2 things in particular, and I'm going to tell you why. From an environmental aspect, out there in my area, we were told that Covanta was safe for over 30 years. Right, they're the highest polluter of NOx in the whole county. Nobody comes close to polluting the NOx in our environment. We were told that that was clean energy too. So I think that you should set aside a few $1 million for an environmental impact report. Once you get ready to start boots on the ground, you need an environmental impact report to look at traffic, water, air quality, to prove that this technology is safe. And second of all, the communities, wherever you decide to put your hub, for lack of a better way of saying it, or wherever you want to put these several hubs, that if they are in disadvantaged communities environmentally, you need to be careful, because we don't want to add any further environmental degradation on the communities that already suffer that disadvantage per the Cal Enviro screen from the Cal EPA. And the last thing that I want to say is that as far as outreach to the community, I looked at this executive committee. It's all schools, organizations, businesses, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Golden Valley. I don't see any individual community members on this. If you really wanted input from the community, you would think that you would have a representative from all 5 districts on this executive committee to give the person that's not a member of an organization, the person that's not a member of a business, somebody that's just a community member input on this process. And to my knowledge, there was one meeting held at the graffiti spot over there, the new graffiti spot over there. And at that meeting, it was all people from the executive committee primarily. And the only community member that attended that was Tom Helm from Valley Improvement Projects. And he also raised the issue of environmental issues and making sure that this new technology is truly a safe technology. Because we don't want to wake up 10 years from now and find out that we allowed something in our community that was not healthy and something that caused health issues. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I know Karen will take that in consideration moving forward. So, thank you very much. All right, any other public comment before we bring it back to the board? Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Corinne Whitlow. I'm not really here to speak on the initiative too much or the goals of Stanislaus 2030. I would definitely have to do a lot more researching into the Brookings Company who helped establish the survey and the plan. What I want to talk about a little bit is the funding of the $10 million that we got due to a respiratory virus going back to develop a high-performing community. I do know funds were dedicated to local priorities. I've seen what other counties have done with their ARPA funding. I'm pretty sure I know how this voting is going to go, but I just kind of wanted to put my 2 cents in. I do feel like it is inappropriate that we're putting money from an emergency response due to a respiratory virus into developing a high-performing community. I do hope the funding that was set aside for job creations takes a look at the small businesses in our communities that were actually most impacted by the respiratory virus that this money was intended to. A lot of businesses weren't able to sustain through COVID policies, so I hope that the money that was once again given to us due to the pandemic and the respiratory virus goes to those companies and jobs in our community that were directly affected by the respiratory virus's policies. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else from the public? Mr. Morrow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Stephen Morrow. I just have 2 quick questions. Concerning the $10 million that's being asked to be authorized, I heard about the $650,000 being set aside to help get Opportunity Stanislaus and this beam circular started with their first year of operations. With the remaining $9.35 million, once this committee over at Beam develops proper use of that 9.35, will they have the authority already to allocate and spend those funds, or will they have to come back to the board for another round of approval? That's question number 1. And question number 2 would be, as part of that 9.35 million, because Mr. Donoso addressed this, to make sure that we have people properly trained to be able to do these high-quality jobs that we're trying to develop, do we have some type of a mechanism to make sure that we can get our own people here properly trained and schooled so that a company doesn't build a large facility and find that they have to go recruit to San Joaquin County or Merced County because the people are not here in Stanislaus County? Now, I realize those 2 counties need good-paying jobs as well, too. But if we're trying to put in money out of our Stanislaus budget, we want to make sure that our own people are in position to be able to fill those jobs. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Jody?
I'd be happy to address a couple of those. First is that all of the additional funding that's being requested, we're asking the board to approve the allocation of up to $10 million in future investments. All of those investments will have to come back before the Board of Supervisors for presentation as well as approval. So all of that comes back to the board. And then as it relates to, I can make a couple of comments on both of the last 2 speakers. When you review the investment blueprint, and I'd be happy to spend some time after this meeting just kind of walking through what some of them are, there's a whole plethora of recommendations related to small business supports. There are a lot of recommendations related to improving what we call our talent pipeline, which is the connection of local workforce to these future jobs as well. That is also specifically baked into the bioproducts proposal. So I think the answers to those questions are here, and I'd love to spend more time if you'd like. I can point those out and we can talk about it. I'm quite confident that we're going to address both of the comments that I just heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Havens. We appreciate that. So anyone else in the public wish to comment before we bring it back to the board? All right, seeing none, we will bring it back to the board. Comments? Go ahead, Vito.
Yeah, and just comments. So great presentation. Thank you so much. And how far and how many ideas that have come out. And I know this is a work in progress, but I appreciate all the people that have served. The one thing I'm not is a buzzkill, because I believe that we have to aspire. We have to set goals for ourselves, and sometimes we don't attain those goals, but it shouldn't stop us from trying continually to improve. The bioindustry, obviously, I think the work the Brookings Institute did identifying us, it's really because of ag. Ag is the base of the economy. Assuming that we have water, because we're in a pretty good irrigation districts area here in Stanislaus County, I think ag is going to continue to be the base of our economy for many, many years. So I think that suits us well. The irrigation districts also have great value in their electricity costs. Some of these are big electric users. So I think we have some just advantages beyond being an ag area for industry. That's why you've seen so many ag processing facilities site and generally in Stanislaus County. This is a hot market because of, you talked a little bit about the carbon footprint, but the work that Divert is doing and that Amentus is doing, especially taking dairy waste and cleaning it up, you see real synergy behind that. The California Air Resources Board, the federal government has many programs. The San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control has, and so people who want to invest have a partner in the government side along with private enterprise. We went to, it's not exactly related, but we went to the Frito-Lay event, and you see the excitement generated about lessening carbon footprint. Businesses want to do that, and there's money to underwrite a portion of that because society benefits from clean air. And it's taken us 50 years to get to this point. It's going to take us 20 or 30 years to get back to some area. I do agree with the comments. The educational attainment is going to be an issue, but that's continually been an issue for the past 20 years on why businesses haven't cited here. But getting everyone in the room, talking about what is required, and some of that is what Miguel said. We need educational attainment. Kids need to read by the time they leave the third grade. We can't just move them on. So there's things that have been systemic, but doesn't mean it has to be the way in the future. So we have to have those goals. I think we know that. And then there are barriers to employment beyond. We talk about the farm workers, and I don't know that there's anyone sitting up here that has a requirement any worse than our farm. We're continually looking for people, but even in that sense, most of the folks have to have some educational attainment. And there's not a second generation, from my dad to my brother and myself, there's not a single family that has helped us be successful that their kids worked on the farm. And now I'm going to include my kids and my brother's kids that are not working on the farm. They move on. They try and reach a higher educational attainment and have a job that doesn't require some of the same things. And sad as that is for myself, creates opportunity for other farmers if my kids don't get into the business. But I think there are barriers to employment. You touched on some of them, Karen, potentially child care and other things, educational attainment, and we're addressing some of those, or we're attempting to address them in the 2030s. So I think it's a blueprint for a reason. A blueprint is a model that we're aiming towards, and we can do course corrections along the way. I do want to echo Stephen's comments that when we're allocating $10 million, but what I look at it is we're allocating $2.3 million over 3 years, and we'll look at how we're going to spend. You're going to come back with recommendations before I'm okay spending the money, because I think there's going to be zigs and zags along the way. Again, to all the people, having the people who are invested in these businesses, it is no different than the mental health board having consumers and people who have lived experience. It just enhances the blueprint. So I'm going to support this. Again, great work. I think we're not done. We have a lot of work to do, but how far we've come in the recent, less than a year is pretty amazing to me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I will entertain a motion.
I'm going to, if I could, yeah. And Buck, did you want to say something else before? Okay. Okay, first, thank you guys for the presentation, and thank everybody for all the work involved in this, and it's gone on for months here, and everything we've done to get to this point. We all want this to succeed. This is real money we're talking about here. It's kind of real one-time money that we probably won't ever see again in our life, I hope. Won't ever see this kind of money printed out again by the federal government and handed to us again. Kind of the linchpin, what we're hanging our hat on, the majority of this investment blueprint is this bio-industrial manufacturing, right? I mean, we're looking for this to be the kind of the anchor that's going to create everything else and all the other parts of this blueprint. It's really going to be dependent on us getting an additional industry here that's going to create all these jobs. So, and I don't want to be the wet blanket on this either, but I want us to be very intent and careful as to how we move forward and do this. And I just don't want us to say it frankly, I don't want us to screw this thing up, you know? I want us to do this right. And so, you know, we look to government for this stuff, and government does not create jobs. It's just, if it does, they're artificial in nature, they're usually short-term, and it's a false market. And the only way for these things to work is for the private sector, for there to be a profit motive in it for them, and then if that happens, then it will move forward and there will be success there. But if it's just the latest and greatest thing that we're chasing after, and I don't think this is, but if it is, then there goes $10 million, and we're back to where we were before. So, and that's happened time and time again. So we have to, like I say, be very intent on how we do this and move forward with this. We talked about the county funding, and there's going to be additional federal and state funding, but again, if the private sector funding doesn't show up and show up in a hurry, then the party's over here pretty quick, and the money is gone. So it's a great concept, what we're talking about this, as far as converting these living organisms and converting them into plastics and dyes and all these different things that could happen, food products. I mean, I went over with Jody, we went over and visited the Lawrence, I don't know if this is Lawrence, Berkeley Lawrence, lab. And it's a small scale, as we've talked about here, but just to refresh everybody's memory, it's a small scale lab that does things at a very small scale and test these products to see if somehow they can convert them into these things. And if it's successful at that level, then they need to do it at a larger scale. And that's what we're talking about here, us being the larger scale facility. And they can then come and use us to do this. The lab in Berkeley is, I think it's got a $7 million budget. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get in the weeds a little bit here, but this is what we need to do to make sure that we are not just all excited about this thing, and this is where it's going to go, and we're not really following every avenue that we should follow. $7 million budget, it's subsidized annually. A $7 million budget, subsidized $2.5 million of it comes from the government. The government is subsidizing that at $2.5 million a year. The other $4.5 million, excuse me, is coming from the private sector, which is a good thing. They are paying this lab to do this testing for us. What happens next, if it's successful there, is that they then need to go, like we said, to a larger scale, and then these customers of the lab, right now we're told, are going outside of the country, as I understand it. And this is something that I think we really need to look into. If we're going to become this larger scale lab and attract these companies that are supposedly going outside, we need to really nail that down. It can't be something that it's kind of this nebulous thing. Oh, they're going to Mexico or they're going to France. I can't remember the different locations. We need to actually do our homework and our due diligence to find out where are these companies going, and then approach these companies. And would you be interested in coming here instead? And how much business will you give us? And so it's a lot of homework that we need to do, and I know that we know this, and that's what I'm hoping that the $650,000 will go towards. And by the end of whatever period of time it is, as I look at your activity and your timeline here, Karen, that you've got down there at the end, funding and partnership development ongoing, I'm hoping that when at that point of the timeline, that looks like March of, I'm not sure when we're going to get there, that we will have then a list of customers who will potentially use this, that we have contacted, that we've gone to their companies, and we've probably, I think we should visit these other places that we're going to do the same thing that they are. We need to go visit wherever they're at in the world. We need to look at that and make sure that what they're doing and that we can do the same thing and make it work. And again, we need to make sure that we have business that will come and provide us customers for this thing to make it work. Because if that doesn't happen, then we go through and we spend, I think we're talking about $31 million to build this facility. If that's, we don't know for sure, but that's what it says in the blueprint that we're initially thinking. We want to make sure that we've got forecast projections that show that we've contacted these individual companies. They will be here. We're talking a lot about startup companies, right? These are small companies that just are funded with investors, and they really don't have any revenue stream at this point. A lot of startup companies. We need to make sure that that they will be interested in coming and spending money with us to expand and scale this up to see if it's going to work. I always wonder about not the non-startup companies, the large chemical companies that are out there. They don't need these labs probably. They have their own labs probably for the most part, because they're large existing Dow Chemical. You can just go through the list of, what are they doing? Do they see? They don't probably see a need for this, or maybe they do. But just all this homework that we need to do. If a few of us up here have started our own businesses and gone through this, and I work constantly with clients. That's what we do, and we have just got to make sure that we are intentional and not just get caught up in, this is a new industry, bioindustrial manufacturing. Here we go. It's the latest. Government is throwing money at it. That's probably the first thing that scares us a little bit. Government's throwing money at it. It's going to be the latest and greatest. It's like the new solar industry. It's just a thing that's coming. That's great, and maybe it is, but maybe it's not. And until we get involved with the private sector and really start working with them and finding out what their needs are and that this is something they want, we can't be spending the remaining of this money. I know we're going to start off with the $650, but we need to have all those questions answered and all that research done and all those partnerships put together and commitments from people in the private sector, businesses in the private sector, that they want to do that. So that's just, I support this for now, but we are so far away from throwing the remaining $9.3 million towards something that we just don't have the answers for, and we need to make sure that we've done our business model and have it in place, and that this thing's going to, nothing is certain. There's always, there's never 100% guaranteed these things are going to work, but we have got to make sure that we've been very intent on making sure that we've crossed all our T's, dotted all our I's, and said, okay, we're going to commit this funding because we have these investors behind us that are going to make this thing work. So anyway, that's my spiel for today. I will support this for now, but I'm just very cautious and just want us to be very much involved in the process as this moves forward, to make sure that this thing is going to work. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll figure out something else. But I'd love to know that before we invested in the remaining $9.3 million. So.
Motion to approve.
Have we have a motion?
Were there any other? I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry.
No, you're fine. We have a motion.
Can I just ask one last question?
Yeah, sure, Manny.
All right. Well, since Buzzkill and Wet Blanket was already taken, I'm going to go with Negative Nelly. And I don't want to be the Negative Nelly, but one of the things that Supervisor Brithrow brought up, and Karen, you said in your presentation, that a lot of these labs are doing this work, and then they're looking for places in other countries to do it. And you don't need to answer this question right now, but please, I'm sure you're going to keep this on your radar as far as we don't want to do all this investment and all the early investment for somebody to get the idea, and then instead of getting those $28 jobs here in the community, going overseas. And that happens a lot, right? Outsourcing happens. It's happened in so many different industries, in the tech industry. So again, you don't even have to answer that right now, but that's something that as this work goes further, that we're not just a breeding ground, so people can outsource jobs for a cheaper labor force, which people try to do. I mean, private industry does it all the time. Instead of paying $28, if they can have the same work done for $14, they're going to go where the $14 position is. So, unless you want to answer, I don't want to prolong this conversation.
Yeah, go ahead. Come on up.
I'll just give a very quick response to that, which is that one thing very encouraging is that many of these firms are going to Europe, and specifically markets in Europe that I guarantee are not cheaper labor markets than we are. And the reason they're going to Europe is that we don't have the physical capacity in the United States to do this scale up of this production. We literally have a facility shortage of fermentation tanks of a certain size for these companies to scale. And the companies in this space that we've interviewed have said they would love to base their operations here, and in particular in a region like ours where the supply chain would be shortened because the feedstock is here, and they just need the other infrastructure ingredients at play in order to make that decision. So I'm feeling hopeful, and everything that everyone is bringing up is exactly why we have to be smart and strategic in investing in all of the necessary groundwork, the relationship development with specific companies to get specific private sector commitments and investment, and to research this out and ensure, this isn't just a lot of talk, but this is going to be practical and implementable. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Chiesa and a second by Supervisor Graywall. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, passes 5-0. All right. Moving on to correspondence.
This board has received the correspondence and claims as noted on the agenda.
Acknowledge receipt of correspondence and refer as recommended on the agenda. Number 9, do we have any Board of Supervisor reports?
If I could really quick, I went out to the Community Service Agency this week and also DCSS, Department of Child Support Services. There we go. And met with Baljeet, and then yesterday with the team, Erlinda, Jeff, and Christine over at CSA. And I encourage, again, not just the board members, but everyone, CSA is such a big department with so many programs. And yesterday I talked about CalWorks and CalFresh and Medi-Cal and the adoption services, foster care services, and then we went ahead and embedded homelessness and housing in their department. So it again is a good reminder of how big the county is, how many programs we have, and how many programs that I don't even remember about. It's truly mind-boggling. And every year in January, February-ish, I try and get out to the departments, as Jim DiMartini used to do. He's the one that had taught me to do this, and it's just really good to talk to the department heads and see the employees at work. So just wanted to report out on that.
Good job. Anybody else? All right, I do have some report. I toured our animal services facility over the weekend. It's great to make a stop by there. I also had breakfast with Sheriff Jeff Dirksey over the weekend. I got to connect with our sheriff, and tonight I am doing a ride-along with Ceres PD, so it's good to get out with our city partners.
Be safe.
I do want to recognize our legislative offices. Do you guys have anything to report tonight? Justin? All right, seeing nothing, thank you for being here. We will move on to legislative fiscal and management report by CEO Hayes.
No report this morning, thank you.
Okay, great. And we do have closed session. Tom?
Yes, we have closed session this morning. Conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D1, one case, State of Xander Mann et al. Versus County of Stanislaus et al. That's in the U.S. District Court, Eastern District, and the case number is 121CV01098. And with that, be appropriate for public comment.
Any public comment? Okay, seeing none, I do want to recognize Deputy Crowley. Thank you for being here today and watching over us. We are going to go ahead and adjourn to closed session at 11:21.